There's a lot of information available on the internet, but today, let's take a moment to verify whether that information is accurate. One thing I'd like to correct is the notion that once kidney function is damaged, there's no way to reverse it. While it's true that treatments vary depending on the type of disease, and even if kidney function has declined significantly, certain treatments can still help restore kidney function, especially depending on the type of kidney disease. So, the statement is somewhat misleading. A proper diagnosis is crucial, and that's something I want to emphasize. That being said, what's most important for long-term kidney health is good nutrition. Although it's hard to overstate how crucial diet is, kidney diseases are often caused by a variety of factors. In modern times, many people neglect physical activity, which is just as important as focusing on food alone. Another misconception is that a low-sodium diet is the best way to protect kidney health. It has been proven that excessive sodium intake doesn't necessarily impact the mortality rate from kidney disease. Therefore, focusing solely on low-sodium diets for kidney health is a bit misleading. The idea that a low-sodium diet helps kidney health isn't something that has been widely recognized for a long time. It was only after the 1990s and 2000s, with epidemiological evidence, that it gained more attention. This isn't something from the 1950s or 60s. The effectiveness of low-sodium diets has been demonstrated through scientific methods, and I just want to clarify that it isn't an outdated concept. What's even more important, though, is potassium. It's not a problem if you consume a lot of sodium, as long as you also consume a lot of potassium. There's an interesting point being made here. While it's claimed that consuming potassium can help mitigate the harmful effects of sodium through its counteracting effects, the scientific mechanisms behind why high potassium intake might benefit long-term mortality rates are still debated and remain a hypothesis. When it comes to severe kidney disease patients, it's hard to fundamentally improve health through food alone. I understand the criticism about why so much emphasis is placed on food when sodium intake can be managed with potassium. However, there are reasons for this approach. One important reason is that for patients with chronic kidney disease, excessive potassium can lead to hyperkalemia, which can be fatal due to its impact on heart rhythm, arrhythmia. This is a serious concern since arrhythmias are linked to sudden cardiac death, and encouraging excessive potassium intake in such patients can be risky. However, for those whose kidney function isn't extremely impaired, there is growing evidence that it may be safe to include potassium-rich foods like vegetables and nuts, though it is still recommended to limit potassium intake. In clinical settings, doctors are much more conservative with potassium recommendations. It is rare to see patients with low potassium levels because the kidneys regulate potassium balance, and it's uncommon for potassium levels to drop unless there is damage to the specific tubular function that regulates it. Lastly, regarding why doctors don't focus more on food choices, it's interesting to note that the researchers leading studies on dietary patterns are often those outside of direct clinical practice. Doctors are very interested in and conduct a lot of research on low-sodium and high-potassium diets. Research on the effectiveness of these diets has continued steadily from the 2010s into the 2020s. However, because much of this research is conducted in single institutions, it's still an ongoing process to build consensus in the broader medical community. Until that consensus is reached, it is recommended to maintain a low-sodium diet. I'm not dismissing the results of these studies. It's significant that large-scale epidemiological research has been conducted, but the interpretation of these results should be approached carefully. Especially for patients visiting hospitals with existing diseases, different mechanisms may apply compared to the general population, making it difficult to universally apply such findings. There was criticism that doctors are too focused on medications and not enough on food. While I regret that I may not always have the time for in-depth dietary consultations due to the limited time in clinical practice, doctors do care deeply about nutrition. I will continue to study the most rational approaches and try to provide care that is practical for our local setting. In academic activities such as conferences, doctors gather to learn together. Regarding the DASH diet, which recommends low sodium and high magnesium intake, the research results indicate that it is okay to consume sodium in moderation as long as potassium intake is sufficient. Today, for instance, if I skip breakfast, I might not eat kimchi or side dishes, which are often high in sodium. If you don't eat meat, it can lead to a significant deficiency of essential nutrients, which could cause more serious health problems. The DASH diet, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, was developed in the United States to help patients with hypertension lower their blood pressure through diet alone. It is based primarily on 3 key components: vegetables, nuts, and whole grains. The DASH diet became popular because it provided meals directly to patients, rather than just offering guidelines. By doing so, they were able to observe significant decreases in blood pressure without additional medication. The diet includes a low-sodium approach, with a sodium limit of 2.3 grams, which is approximately equivalent to 5 grams of salt. This sodium amount was based on the typical DASH diet meals, which averaged around 5 grams of salt. When comparing a typical diet to the DASH diet, patients who followed the DASH diet showed noticeable reductions in blood pressure without any added medications, making it a highly recommended low-sodium diet. Even when following the DASH diet, it was designed to ensure that other nutrients, such as minerals and proteins, were not deficient. To make low-sodium meals more flavorful, the diet offers advice on using other spices, like pepper, which can be helpful if you're concerned about food tasting bland due to reduced salt intake. If you're interested, you might want to explore the DASH diet to see how you can apply it effectively. Regarding potassium, you mentioned bananas, which are indeed rich in potassium and fiber, which helps with digestion. However, it is important to note that people who had positive results in nutrition studies were not simply eating bananas alone. In nutrition research, the focus is often on a balanced diet, not on emphasizing a specific food. Those who had better results typically had a higher potassium intake within a balanced diet. Taking potassium in refined form, such as potassium supplements, can be risky. It can cause serious stomach problems, including ulcers, so it's not recommended to consume synthetic potassium in pill form. It's a separate issue from eating foods that naturally contain potassium. Thus, it's essential to avoid potassium supplements unless medically advised. Eating salty foods like kimchi, ramen, and other foods without worrying as long as you maintain adequate potassium intake may be misleading. While increasing potassium can help, it should be part of a balanced diet. Regarding kidney health, the most critical factors to consider are regular exercise and managing blood sugar levels. The leading cause of kidney damage is diabetes, so it's important to prevent diabetes and manage blood sugar well. Regular physical activity is essential, as modern lifestyles often lack sufficient exercise. Additionally, it's crucial to avoid medications that can be toxic to the